Right. Good afternoon to those that are on our same time zone, and maybe for those joining us online, you might have a different time zone. I will say extend and say good morning and good evening, depending on whichever time zone you are on. And I'm glad to actually taking the mic and introduce to you a very wonderful panel that I have here. I have these three wonderful gentlemen that are going to be actually having a conversation around cybersecurity. More importantly, interested in looking at cybersecurity awareness. And I like the way the title or almost like a theme that we're going to be discussing around has been coined around our connected lives. What's your aptitude? And there is an emphasis on the app, the understanding that we find ourselves almost having apps in almost everything that we are using or interacting with today, especially what the pandemic has really forced us to find ourselves in a space where almost everything is app driven. And do we know the impact of that digital footprint in a sense? I have a more of questions than I do have the answers, which is why I'm taking the moderator role. And my name is Atli Gamundani. I'm a senior lecturer in the computer science department at Namibia University of Science and Technology. I'm also an advisory board member for PICTA. And I'm joined with Jasper. I'll introduce in more detail as we go to actually the session where we am opening up our panelists. And I'm also joined with Chris. And also I'm joined with Dr. Edmore. I'm going to start off with Dr. Edmore Chindenga. I'll just give a very quick, brief bio before I open up for him to just open up the session for us. And I'm glad to indicate to you this is being hosted by University of Fort Hare in conjunction with PICTA Secure Academy, to be more specific. So introducing Dr. Edmore, I find his profile very fascinating because it's more or less linked or tied to my interest areas. So Dr. Edmore is a lecturer and a postgraduate coordinator in the Information System Department at the University of Fort Hare. He holds a degree in computer science with a special focus on privacy and security in the Internet of Things. He is currently involved in research in cybersecurity and cyber safety. I was more impressed to learn that actually Dr. Edmore is a Checkpoint certified security administrator trainee. And when I was looking at his PhD studies, I found out he was looking at identifying risk factors that are unique to the IoT environment in Africa and some of the weaknesses that may be around that. I hope he's going to share more about that. I don't want to take much time. Dr. Edmore, can you start this discussion for us? And I will maybe probably ask you to just walk us maybe through your perspectives around some of the aspects that are happening on the ground, just to give us what's really happening on the ground when you're looking at South Africa in the context. Maybe you could highlight for us what is the current cyber threat landscape of South Africa looking like, and how has remote work played a role towards the prevailing cybersecurity threat landscape, and maybe finally just look at what would you say is the impact of some of those cybersecurity threats on the productivity on the ground. Over to you, Dr. Edmore.
Thanks, Ashley, and welcome to everyone who is joining us for this session. It's wonderful to have you, and it's quite an interesting theme that we have, actually. Like you said, what's your aptitude? Yeah, what's your approach towards being in this digital environment and interacting with applications that you're using for day-to-day operations, be it just maybe social media, music streaming, banking, you name it. So actually, like what you're saying, we have a very interesting cybersecurity landscape in South Africa. We haven't been left behind in terms of the evolution of technology. Also, even within the cybersecurity space, there's been quite a lot that's been happening in South Africa. But of major concern has been the risks and the threats that we've seen of late, particularly in the past 2-3 years, following through to the 2 years that we were dealing with the effects of the pandemic as a nation. And during that period, as a country, we actually witnessed an increase in cybersecurity threats, which is not that much alarming because the trend has been global. But what makes it particularly alarming in our context is that no one was ever trained or no one was ever prepared to deal with these things. We found ourselves having to go away from home. We have to use our work devices for practically everything that's doing work, personal stuff, and everything was just sitting on that particular device, whether it was a mobile phone or a work computer. So we found ourselves in a very unique circumstance in that nobody ever trained us to say this was going to come one day. You'll find yourself being at home, you don't have access to all the security infrastructure that your institution is providing, the support, the technical support that you have from the IT guys. Everything was just all on you as a staff member or maybe as a learner in most cases, as also our students had to actually learn from home. So that, in essence, actually increased the data exposure surface in South Africa generally, where you now have a whole lot of data that's available, and that increased surface also attracts even more of these trends. And amongst those that were attracted to participate in trying to infiltrate, maybe breach, you find that yet certain categories, primarily with those that are just enthusiasts. You see, people come across technology, they feel like, I want to try this. Where am I going to try it? Okay, let me do this breach on this particular institution. They're just a fanatic. They just want to see how it works out. Maybe it's a new technology tool that they've been exposed to. But of major concern has been the the criminals, because this presented a very huge opportunity for criminals to actually try and access and breach data from different institutions, and in some cases impersonate and stand as being the legitimate maybe service providers, since everyone was working from home and nobody had access to the offices. So that presented a very huge challenge. And as we are sitting currently, just looking at the trends from the years like 2019 coming through into 2020, 2021, we've actually seen over 25% increase in malware on our cyber environment. We've also seen an over 80% increase in card-related fraud, that's banking, where with transactions that are not traceable to any allocated or assigned bank cards. And we've seen an over 100% increase in mobile application banking fraud. And this just to mention but a few, because we also have fraud cases that are coming through from your mobile banking, like you see these instant wallets that we're using. Also, people having to change SIM cards for other people just to access the banking details. So we've seen quite a lot within these past 2 years, and from the outlook, it doesn't seem as if that the attackers are deterring. They are being more and more innovative, and that this calls on the defenders, that is the users as well as the service providers, to actually do more to combat what we're seeing currently. So yes, actually, that's what I would say from the South African perspective, and with the greatest concern being on the users themselves, because these are people in most cases that are of non-technical backgrounds that are now being called upon to actually carry out roles that would require a high level of technical competence from their side. So I've said that we have quite a very interesting landscape, cybersecurity landscape in South Africa, which is dynamic, and apart from the traditional challenges, the technological challenges that we're facing, we really have the issue of our users being one of those core issues that we need to address as a nation. Thank you so much, Aki. I'll just leave it there for now.
Perfect. Thank you, Eddie. Allow me to strip the titles for the purpose of this conversation, so that I make the conversation more friendly and lighter. Right, you have really pointed out a number of interesting aspects that you're going to be revisiting. Let me bring in Chris. I'll just quickly give a very brief bio for Chris. So Chris is a founder and CEO of African Cybersecurity. I would abbreviate it ACS, Botswana's leading cybersecurity consulting firm. So ACS just for information purposes, organized a leading multi-stakeholder cybercrime conference, which was their 6th annual conference in September 2022. I hope Chris is going to shed a bit of some insights on what were some of the key findings or discussions from that as well. So Chris has spoken at numerous national and international conferences and was a major contributor to Botswana National Cyber Week, which was held in October 2021. And Chris moderated sessions on cybersecurity in the era of the 4th Industrial Revolution. Also, he was a panelist on topics including building a cyber career, information sharing on cybersecurity workforce in Botswana's university and industry kind of a collaboration engagement. And there's a lot that I can really share when it comes to the work that Chris is doing. I've also learned in the collaboration with the Sereanu in Kenya, which they launched their first cybersecurity report for Botswana for 2019. And I know they are busy with what's also they're calling the data protection for Botswana also as well, which is supposed to happen this year. Chris, in the same fashion as maybe Dr. Eddie was trying to share the landscape in terms of cybersecurity threats, would you care to share what's the African outlook like in terms of some of those aspects, and also in what ways have you seen maybe remote work from maybe your interaction, especially even also from the conference, cybersecurity threats increasing, and especially for an average user or just an end user, not an average user, an end user with a mobile device with those apps? What have you seen? What could you share with us?
Yeah, thanks, Italy. Yeah, so just quick update. We've actually launched the new report now as well. I'll try and endeavor to share a link with you. So I've got some sort of key findings I can share with you as well. But a lot of the conference was similar to what we're talking about today. We were sharing global threats, local threats, and we've got introduction of data protection law, and that's sort of common throughout Africa. That it's now a legal obligation on companies to look after the data, which is really what we're talking about when it comes to cyber. So basically, the threats within Botswana and probably regionally, and not unique. We face the same threats as everyone else throughout the world. Some of the themes I'd share, which are the main ones. We're looking at remote access issues, obviously with working from home, privileged access abuse, password sharing, admin password sharing. It's been a big problem. Phishing, as we all know. We all get those emails from Nigeria promising us to get rich. That's always a problem. Fraudulent transactions, both internally, externally, deployment of rogue devices. Social engineering is becoming far more sophisticated now. We're not just talking about phishing emails now. We're talking about phishing with the cell phones. We're talking about physically going into organizations, intimidation. So there's the threat landscape is there, and as always, your staff, can be a problem. So yeah, we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot of sort of basic sort of fraudulent activities, let's just call it, because cyber crime and crime is crime. So there's a lot of con work and money going missing from bank accounts from the ordinary man on the street. Problems with the social the money through telcos, etc. So you're asking about the remote working. That's caused huge changes within organizations. Changes within networks, architecture. Suddenly, having to get secure VPN links, remote desktop protocols, etc., remote access, which of course introduces a whole new risk to environment. And of course, the IT guys are not there within the offices monitoring those. So yeah, we saw a lot of problems there. And just put some numbers to it. Remote connections, unsecure remote connections grew by 23% during this time. Remote desktop protocol increased 41%. VPN access unsecure increased by a third. So, that's huge. What effects did this have? We've seen huge rise in ransomware. I'm sure you've probably seen that in South Africa as well and across the globe. And this is not like the WannaCry outbreak that we had a few years ago, where there were codes, decryption keys. We could decrypt and get our files back. The new ransomware is harsh. If you don't have good backups, you're not getting your data back. You can pay, and people have been paying, and it's huge problems because you'll pay. They'll give you a couple of files, and then they'll want more money, and they'll keep bleeding you. They're clever. So that has been a huge problem. What else we see? Business email compromise. We're not making use of secure protocols on our email, so it's very easy to phish within the region. So you send phishing emails coming out from the finance director to the managing director. Everything's on social media now. So, release these funds for this project that we're doing. A lot of money is going missing like that. ATM malware, over 20 ATM malware versions have been identified in the last 12 months. So, there's huge issues out there for everyone. And of course, you now need to be an IT expert to be a hacker. These kits are available to hack. They're available from the dark web. You can get your fully supported ransomware kit, your fully supported ATM hacking kit. So, awareness is key, because the 2019 report, the skills just aren't there at the moment. We need to build those skills, and I know we're all together on that one. But I think I've had my 5 minutes, so thank you. I'll hand you back. That's it.
Thank you, Chris. You have touched on a number of aspects. I think that's going to really open up a very interesting discussion from here. Let me now bring in Jasper, and I'll just give a quick bio for Jasper. So Jasper is a cybersecurity professional and media enthusiast from the Netherlands with a passion for creating unique experiences. He studied computer science at the University of Twente and cybersecurity for his master's. So he also executed security assessments for a variety of small, medium, and large enterprises. He participated in Dutch international hacking competitions and now organizes a national program for young cybersecurity talents to develop their interest and skills to compete in the European Cybersecurity Challenge. He hosts the Dutch Cybersecurity Podcast. I hope I got... it should be the Dutch pronunciation. I should have asked him, actually. It's What the Heck podcast. I hope I got it right.
Perfect, perfect.
Wonderful. And now he has his own company with which he combines media and cybersecurity. So the awareness space is his comfortable turf. I hope, Jasper, you would actually open us some international perspective in terms of the same concepts that Chris and Eddie also highlighted. Please take us through what is the threat landscape like? Is it any different from what Chris or Eddie has highlighted, and what else maybe could you also add on top of that? Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. So a lot of the topics you already discussed I really recognize, and I think also in an international environment, those are kind of the same. So I see mainly, I think, 4 different kind of challenges that we face right now. So first of them is ransomware. Chris, you already talked about it, but I think the main problem with this is that I see that with some companies, they are just not secure enough, and it's too easy to ransom a company, basically. And on the other hand, the impact is very, very large, because if a company from one day to the other day just stops working, people cannot access their files, they cannot produce their products, for example. It stops, and they need to make a choice to or pay or not pay. But in both cases, there are huge financial impact as well. So I think that's one of our main challenges for now. I also think general awareness is a big challenge, not only for individuals, but also within companies. And I think most trainings to create awareness are about phishing mails, for example. But I think it's a bit broader. I think it's more about having a certain mindset to verify who he says he is, for example, if things are right. Also creating a culture where if you do something, so for example, if you do click on a phishing link, that you talk about that with your colleagues or your peers. So especially within an enterprise, the IT team can still do something in most cases. If you say, well, I had an email, I clicked, what now? And I think you need to create a kind of culture where people are thinking about their actions, their impact, and also discussing this with their peers. For example, specifically in the Netherlands, one of the main smaller frauds that's being done right now it's called WhatsApp fraud. And the premise is quite simple. So you get a WhatsApp message from a random phone number, and it says, for example, oh, Daddy, I have a new phone, but I'm a bit in financial trouble. Please pay me 5,000 euros to buy something.
Wow.
Which it sounds a bit silly, but a lot of people fall for it because I think people need to learn a mindset where you're thinking, wait, is this really who he says he is? Can I verify it? Maybe even call them to check if it's really true. So I see that as a challenge. Third challenge is, I think, education. So specifically learning people this mindset, but also creating more cybersecurity experts because there's a huge shortage of this worldwide. And I think the fourth thing that worries me a little bit, but it's something that I do not know enough about to talk more about it, but that's espionage and disruption. And that is mainly on a scale of countries. And for, I think, most companies, this is not a direct threat to them, but to a nation, a country, it can be a huge threat, especially in times of, for example, war. You want to protect your critical infrastructure, and I think there are challenges and measures that we need to take action on right now already. And to talk still a little bit about the remote work part of it, I think that opened quite some extra doors because information is more accessible from everywhere in the world in most cases. And if you don't have your cybersecurity in order, then you open a lot more doors for an international ransomware groups, for example, to hack you, basically. So I think that's quite worrisome, but we also see that companies are learning how to put a right VPN everywhere, for example, and to educate people to not use their own software, but only the company software that they can manage in terms of cybersecurity risks. So that's it from my part.
Thank you, Jasper. You actually found a way of summarizing some of the key aspects already highlighted by Eddie and Chris in a very smarter way. And I'm seeing some feedback also from the participants. Is it Trudy? I hope I'm getting the name correct. And I'm also, on that note, encourage our participants online to pose the questions as we are proceeding with the conversation, so that at least we can attend to any questions or anything that will need clarification. Then we can actually jump into that as well. Right, maybe for us to, since we have just warmed up, to provide a starting point for our discussion, we may just take a quick breather and now really digest some of these aspects that we have just highlighted. I would maybe take just a very quick minute breather, just maybe some for, yeah, we're going to have a jingles, then we will come back. Just stay tuned. Welcome back, and if you're joining us, we are here discussing about cybersecurity threats landscape, and I'm joined in with these three wonderful gentlemen, Jasper, Chris, and Eddie. And during our first segment, we just highlighted a number of aspects around the cybersecurity threat landscape, where we looked at what's really the context in the local context in which we are focusing on South Africa, then the regional context from Chris, where we were focusing on the regional aspects. Also, we found out there isn't much of a difference. It's pretty much more or less some of those challenges. Then we got an international perspective from Jasper, where he highlighted also in a quick summary some four main aspects to also just wrap up the discussion. We touched on ransomware. And also, I like the aspect that you brought in, the aspect of culture, the aspect of education, and of course, the last point you highlighted on espionage and destruction. And looking at that, I want us to take this discussion to the next level in a sense, and where we try to just open up and say, let's digest on some of these threats in a sense. And for somebody who is a cybersecurity maybe concerned person to say, I am in the digital space, and how do I really protect myself? How do we create awareness for somebody who is not from the technical background? How do we help them to maneuver those threats? They are really not friendly in a sense. And maybe from those threats, and one of the things I would also remind our participants online, please, if you have questions that you want us to attend to, just post them on the chat. We would be in a position to attend to them as we proceed with the discussion. So let me start maybe with Jasper, so that at least we get from the international perspective, going back and see how we can also localize some of the best practices in a sense. So maybe what are some of the practical actions you would maybe say an end user could employ to improve their cybersecurity posture based on some of the international best practices, for example?
There are a lot of tips, but specifically for an end user, one of the main things I would recommend is being clever about choosing your passwords. Because something that we see regularly, both for individual users, but also as an entry point within companies, for example, is that people choose or easily predictable passwords, so easy passwords, or they use the same password for multiple services. So, for example, if you use for Facebook one password, and then you use for your bank the same password. Now, in the case that Facebook gets hacked and your password is known by an attacker, we can just look it up online, basically. And we'll just try, maybe this person also used the same password for other services. So let's try that. And most of the times that will actually work. So what I would recommend is get a password manager. And what this does for you is it creates a very strong random passwords for every service. And then you, if one service gets hacked, you don't necessarily leak your access to other services. So that's definitely a tip. And on the other hand, I would say we need more education on a really young age about just in general how you can be secure on the internet. Because what I also see is that a lot of really, really young kids get access to the internet by getting a phone or access to a computer, for example. So I would say it's really important to have this in primary education. But specifically for us in the Netherlands, I don't think it's there enough. So I would like that to be improved. But also as a parent, I think you need to teach your children how this works, but not even every parent knows how to best protect themselves online. So that's really difficult, I think.
Interesting. I like the aspect that you are bringing in, the concept of education. I think this is where awareness comes also into play. And there's always this saying around to say, you can't give what you don't have. So if as a parent, I don't know how also to protect myself, how can I teach the child? So I don't know if maybe Chris, Eddie, you would want to react on that one. Because I think it's a very important component, because this is where we are having this deadlock, because we want to create awareness, and we normally say charity begins at home. How do we extend it?
Yes, actually, I'll chip on that. It's actually quite amazing that cybersecurity, security in general is for everyone, and we can agree on that. Actually, the most interesting thing is that you actually find that the younger ones, the younger generation is actually more apt when it comes to cybersecurity awareness than the elder ones, and it presents more like a flipped reality in a way, where actually the young ones have to school the older ones, and most of the issues where fraud cases happening have actually been mostly with the elder ones because they are naturally more trusting. They get these messages. I think it's a social aspect of us being humans. They're more social. They feel like, okay, someone is in need. I'm gonna send them 1,000. I'm gonna send them 5,000, and only to find out that it was a scam. So it's actually quite interesting to find out that much of the awareness that we need to push out has to be targeted towards the older generations because they find themselves with devices. In some cases, they're not even aware how this thing actually works. They know the basic functionalities, but in terms of maybe going through the ins and outs of securing that device, or even implementing some of the software that they may get, like maybe antivirus software on that device, they might not even know. And it's actually very interesting that while we look at how we can literally educate everyone towards cybersecurity, we have a greater need to actually focus on the generations that actually grew up, and were not exposed so much to these technologies. I think that's a very that's an input I can give on that.
Okay,
So-
Eddie, before I forget, there's seem to be like an echo at the back, and I don't know if we are also in a room for someone who is listening, maybe online or something.
All right, let me take the tech to attend to that.
Oh, okay. I almost forgot to check on that. Yeah, Chris, you wanted to say something, or Jasper? I saw you wanted to jump in again.
Look,
yeah.
guys,
So, oh, sorry.
Okay, Chris, go ahead. Then we'll go back to Jasper.
Yeah, no, I concur with everything that's been said. I think, with the rest of Africa, I think we've even got more sophisticated problems as well because, the different cultural issues, the various demographics, the way a lot of the kids go to the villages and brought up by the grandparents. These present, huge challenges. And yes, start with education, the awareness. The kids are aware. We had an Estonian speaker at our conference, and they had a very interesting initiative. They sent their primary school children home to audit their parents' IT environments. It's.
But I think that's a great idea actually to use that. So for example, in the Netherlands we also have this initiative, and they have like this game basically for a really young audience. So think maybe 8 years old, 10 years old, something around that age. And they can play it online, and it's the narrative is that you are a cyber agent, and they actively learn you within the game some awareness how to behave online. But they also call for those agents to teach their parents or maybe even their grandparents to not click on a link, for example, or not fall for a phone scam. And that's what I really like. And they actually work together with the local police, for example. So they even, I think they select their best cyber agent, and then the local police gives them an award, for example. So they really make some noise with that, and I really like that initiative as an idea.
Impressive. Okay, Chris, were you done, or you wanted to add more on that as well?
I think it's like general hygiene, isn't it? Personal hygiene. We're talking about cyber hygiene. Keeping your environment clean and healthy and swept. Keeping your software up to date. Your phone software, the software, not running outdated software. Doing the basics. If everyone did the basics, including organizations, and even big organizations and governments, if they got the basics right, they cut up the vast majority of the problems that we envisage. So, I think we always talk about low-hanging fruit, and I think let's address, because the situation is complex and huge, and it often gets very difficult to talk about. So if we concentrate on sort of basic hygiene and talk about basic hygiene, keeping passwords, not running illicit software downloaded, from Pirate Bay or whatever, then we will cure a lot of the problems.
Perfect.
Agreed.
I think, Eddie, do you want to react to what Vusi has posted as a question there? I think we can take it along instead of just waiting for a Q&A, and we can just grab on that. So Vusi is indicating that there's the role that users can play and the importance of education. Is there intensive drive towards a recalculation and course redesigning in South Africa higher education?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I trust that my audio is now much better.
I don't know the echo where it's really just coming from.
Okay. Maybe it's
Proceed.
it should be fine. Am I clear? Oh, perfect.
Yeah, let's proceed.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vusi, for the question. Yes, you see, in South Africa, particularly, we've just seen the inception and introduction of the POPI Act, and that just shows the broader approach from a government perspective to actually integrate aspects around privacy, information, protection of information, and generally security. And this is now bringing most of the this is bringing companies into play where they're actually forced to implement some of the security, get checking in a way that they never really did initially. So from a national perspective, where the government is coming in with policies, legislation to try and drive people to awareness, I would say we are just getting started. It's not something that we really have had as a country. But on an individual perspective, you see that most of our users have already been participating in a digital world, and they maybe one way or the other they've been exposed to this stress, and someone might have actually fallen victim of some of these attacks. And just by virtue of them being victimized, they in a way then take the stand to actually educate themselves. So much of the education that we have as a country around cybersecurity is information that goes around communities, and it hasn't been formalized. In most cases, it hasn't been brought into our education system. So you find out that we do have maybe offerings around cyber safety, which might be maybe out of a degree program. It's just basically a single chapter, which is not sufficient because cybersecurity in itself is actually a very broad and field that evolves very, very quickly. So really, that's a very strong point there from Vusi to say we need in the recalculation to bring aspects of cybersecurity, and apart from just teaching people the technologies in terms of the basics for interaction, are we making them aware of the dangers and the threats, and how are we building this into the people to actually equip them? Like what Chris said, it's general hygiene, it is for everyone, and I like the fact that Vusi is bringing to us the need to actually bake this into our education system, maybe from primary, even kindergarten, because right now we have kids in kindergarten that are actually using devices. You come back from work, your child wants to use your laptop, they want to play a game, but what is their competence as far as just knowing the basics? Do they respond to everyone who sends a message? Maybe you left your email open, or how are they going to interact with that? So yes, I think it's something that we actually need to look at from the basic all the way up into our work environments. I don't know if the other panelists also want to chip in into that.
So for me personally, I do not know the curriculum in South Africa specifically. So I think it should, like general awareness in particular, should be woven more into earlier education, maybe. So education for everyone. And especially in the Netherlands, in higher education, we also have specific cybersecurity courses as well, which is kind of part of IT and computer science. And I think that's really good. sometimes some practical skills are missing there. And for that, I think it's a lot of fun because there's a whole community online which creates cybersecurity challenges as well. So in your free time, you can also play these cybersecurity games, which is actually both for people who are really new to cybersecurity, but also really advanced players who even play these competitions worldwide, which is basically also a form of education, I think. And what we see now is that this kind of games, these competitions, those are now also woven back into the education. So sometimes within educational programs, they say, well, we have those challenges, and you can get points for those challenges, which makes it a bit more engaging and easy to roll out to, I think, more educational programs as well. So I think making it fun really helps bringing home a message to everyone.
I want to come back to Eddie as well, while we are still on that point, because his point that he raised, where he highlighted that cybersecurity is for everyone, which is one aspect that at least I do concur with him. But you look, even when I go back to what Vusi has posed as a question, to say the recalculation. If you look at that, it's appealing to the formal education system. But we do have a population that are not in that mainstream education system. How are we reaching out to them to create that awareness? Because eventually we have that unserviced population, in a sense, if I may put it across for lack of better words. Chris, how do we reach out to them, and how can we really advance some practical tips around even the device that they're using? Because in the sense of extending digitalization, you buy the devices, you give it to your grandmother who is in the rural area. Are we educating them around cybersecurity? How are we reaching out to them?
How do we reach them? This is the question. And where do we start? I think in the same way as the board needs to take responsibility for cyber awareness, the executive in a country needs to take responsibility for cyber awareness as well. And I think it's got to start right from the top, from a policy level. I know within Botswana, we've launched a very good national cybersecurity strategy, and awareness is very much part of that. And they have rolled out programs. It's a case of collaborative efforts, working with willing funders, working with NGOs, working with academia, and working with the private sector, and as all working together to get that message across. The problem is keeping the momentum, which we find, because there's a lot of initiatives get started and enthusiasms go. And the thing with any of these programs with awareness, they need to be constant. It's about changing a culture, really. I know I come from the UK. I would say, my 85-year-old mother with, slight dementia has got probably more awareness than a whole lot of people around here. So, and that's because it's been drilled in by their banks. It's every time you do a transaction, there's a warning. When you get a message from the bank, everything is you're taught from all different directions on, to watch out for scams, be aware, be suspicious, because bad practices at work will mean bad practices at home. Bad practices at home, you're going to bring those back into the workplace. So yeah, who's responsible?
Well,
yeah, and I think we also need to. Yeah,
yes,
I think we need to accept as well that it's not like a campaign that you can do for 1 or 2 months. It might take years to really raise the general level of awareness to a new standard. So I think it's what you say. It's really important to, on a national level, coordinate this, and yeah, push through that and make campaigns that maybe are longer. So for example, multiple years, that can really help. Because I'm wondering what kind of campaigns do you do now, and on what target audience do you focus within those campaigns?
Great question. Eddie, would you want to respond to that one?
Thank you. Well, I actually wanted to throw another one for discussion to Jasper, in terms of the follow-ups really like on the campaigns, because we're looking at maybe setting up a reach out program for educating, raising awareness to a particular population. But then the challenge is that we have an ever-evolving cyber threat space, and sometimes we are actually trying to play catch up because these things are evolving very, very quickly. So, how do we manage? I think I'd like to get like from a corporate perspective, how do we manage keeping people on their feet? And also, another thing is how much or when we strike the balance to actually say security has become like how much security can we balance with productivity, because we do have those instances when you have multiple layers of security within a system such that it actually impedes and retards productivity. And particularly now when we're working from home, you find out that you want to connect by a VPN. That VPN, yes, its own requirements. Getting onto the institutional infrastructure is its own their own gatekeepers. And all in all, you'll be like, okay, I'm just gonna maybe find another way of doing this. Let's use another platform. Let's not use the official platform. Let's do this on maybe Google Meet or another platform because of those overprotection. I would say I don't know if there's over security, but something like that where you just have too much of these security measures such that it returns on productivity. So maybe just some tips also in that. But in terms of the intervention that we can have, I think we can build them within our regular, say, research activities. Maybe we say, okay, we have students that are working on this particular community on this particular topic. Can we say over the course of the next 3 years, when this particular student is doing this research, how do we bring in community engagement as part of research to support ongoing support for the community? I would say that in a way, from our perspective, brings in a sustained approach towards disseminating information and creating sustainable awareness in our communities.
Right. You are highlighting the concept of community engagement, which is quite very important. I think it's also coming strong in terms of the discussion as well. The need to have an inclusive approach, and of course, an appreciation that is going to take some time. Let me just come back to the theme that we are being guided in terms of our discussions here to say our connected lives. What's your aptitude? I want to go back to the apps, and normally we have to seem to have this trap in terms of freemiums and all that. You can easily install an app, and sometimes there are certain trade-ins you have to do when you're installing that app on your device. It asks access to the camera. Normally we just say accept. No one goes into the details around that. How do you really advise end users of such devices or of such apps? Because there is this trying to draw the line between privacy and functionality, security and convenience. It's really a challenge. How do we really advise end users to maneuver that space? It's almost like a catch-22 kind of a setup. Anyone who wants to take it up?
All right.
Sure.
Maybe I'll kickstart this one.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So, like you're saying that it's more like a catch-22 scenario because in some of these, actually in most of these apps, you actually get a leave it or take it scenario. So it's either you accept or you don't get to use this thing altogether. And when you are confronting such a situation, in most cases, the users end up accepting, and you find out that the terms are not negotiable. You can't even say, I'm going to give you this much of this particular information. Why do you need my phone number? I'm not going to be making calls on this app. My email, maybe I can give you a pseudonym or something like that. So it's a very interesting scenario, and one would look at, say, can we build in systems or facilities that allow users to negotiate certain of those terms? Can we build in as policies to say if a company is doing this kind of business or an app is doing this kind of functionality, this is the amount of data that they can actually get, and beyond that, the user has to volunteer some of the information. So I would say that it falls largely on policymakers also, because as it stands, the user has an option to either take this thing or leave it. And then they just have to go on the easy way, which is I'm gonna take this because I need to use the app. Yeah.
Interesting. I like the negotiation component that you're bringing in. Jasper, you wanted to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think privacy is in that sense a very difficult topic to address because everyone sees it a little bit differently. I think specifically for applications or websites on your computer or phone, basically in my eyes, it doesn't really matter because they're quite the same in that sense. I think it's not bad per se to give up some privacy to get a service, for example, for free. But I think it needs to be an informed decision. So that means that that you, as a user, understand what a company gathers from you in terms of information or how their product works, and then you can say, all right, that's fine with me. I trade that in for example, a free service. I think that's not really bad, but I think companies are really not that transparent in what exactly they collect. And laptops, computers, phones are not always transparent either in the permissions you give to certain apps. So, for example, to access your camera, I think phones in general the last couple of years have improved. So you can now, in some cases, give specific permissions. So if they ask you, can I use the camera? And you say no, you can still use the app, for example, which is good, but it can be way better, I think. And especially, for example, if you just use a service like Facebook or Google or any kind of service, they're tracking something of you, but I think very little or very few people know what they track exactly of you. I think that's a problem because then you're paying with your data, but you don't exactly know what data you're paying with. And if you make this transparent, people can then also say, I don't like this, I will not use the service. And then they can force maybe some companies to change their policies a little bit. But I think it's really difficult because to know exactly what they do, that's kind of a difficult topic to address, even for technical people, let alone everyone who uses those products.
Interesting. Chris, what's your reaction on that?
Can I ask when was the last time anyone read a privacy notice?
Good person.
So for me, I don't even remember actually. So
then I think it's, what the role does the regulator play? And the regulators are getting tough. We got GDPR now. I don't know what Poppy stands on this, but I think Instagram, they got hammered in Ireland. Can you remember, Jasper? It was millions of 20, maybe 20, 200 million euros. It was a crazy amount of money. There's a lot of talk around Facebook, and like a third of the users are under the age of consent that should be using it. So who's responsible for that? They're self-declaring they're 16 and above when most kids are, as we know, even here, or especially here, I would say, have access to the most horrendous stuff, isn't it? Really, from a very, very early age.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about that actually. So for the first part, I'm really wondering. So they can say to a company, "Oh, you need to pay €1 million because you violated this and that." But if the company then thinks, "Okay," and just continues, then it doesn't do anything. So I'm always wondering if we do enough to really change the companies or not. And specifically for the younger children, I'm really worried about this because there are, I think, some good laws at different places around the world protecting children, that they cannot collect data, for example, for children because they cannot give consent. But I think it just doesn't work. But because you have some apps that are specifically targeted on younger children, and I also researched some of these apps, and they have like they ask you your age, for example. But yeah, if you slide the slider a bit more down to be a bit older, then you can just use the app. And I'm worried that a lot of children do this, and then there's no you cannot check this, especially because some companies originated from countries somewhere completely else in the world, and then you don't know what information is taken and what this will do to the children. Maybe you can even influence what those children see, and maybe even influence decisions in a country on the longer term. So I'm a bit worried about this topic in general, but I'm also not sure what a good solution would be.
That shows it's one of those questions we really have to think of action steps around, bringing some practical actions and all that, because that keeps on being a gray area, and that needs to be addressed in a sense. That would be my take from that. But still, I want to still pose the question from a user perspective to say, you know what, is there really like a way of me gaining visibility on my digital footprint, especially when I'm using those apps? The fact that you have mentioned the whole black box approach when it comes to, we have no idea what the companies are collecting through the apps. When I say accept, maybe you have come across certain tools, if any, you could actually share, but if none, no sweat. But this, we know we still have to have that discussion kickstarted. Is there a way of gaining visibility of my digital footprint when I'm using the apps?
Kind of, there is actually. So in Europe, we have the GDPR, and within this regulation, they force websites, companies, apps to create a button where you can download all your information that they collected about you. So it's mostly a bit hidden because they're not like download all your information so you can see what we collect about you. But for example, for some larger services, so for example, Google has a button where you can download from all Google services the information that they have on you. So I would recommend, if you've never done this, do it, because it can be really insightful to see what they collect. And it could also maybe make you change your preferences, because you can also, under the GDPR, change some of your preferences, so they cannot collect some information that you think is private, for example. But I'm not sure if that's available everywhere around the world where there's not these kind of regulations, because I think most companies only do this if they need to do because of regulations. But I think it's a really nice feature, and could be insightful to check this out. But that still, to me, also raises the question, but that's really speculation. Is that really everything they know about you? But that I'm not sure of.
Yeah, good question. All right, Eddie, you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. I think it's an issue of trust, and which is very, very relative. And from previous experiences with these tech companies, we have come to a point where we no longer trust them because of certain things that have been unearthed. So even for them to say we are coming out, this is all that we are collecting about you, I personally don't trust that that much as well. So from a South African perspective, like I said earlier, that much of the drive towards cybersecurity is still quite incipient. You'll find that also one of the challenges that we have is that much of the technology that we're consuming, whether they're devices or software, is actually not made in South Africa. So the technology, we're actually importing it. And when we import it, it also comes with its regulations, like from whoever is manufacturing it, within the environment that they're manufacturing it. And when we put that into our environment, sometimes we don't have that much of an overarching control on certain things, which I would also want to redirect to policymakers to say, what can policymakers do? Like when we look at trade in general, there are certain rules in trade where a company can just come into an environment and start trading. There are policies around that. But as far as technology is concerned, you find that quite a lot infiltrates and gets into our environment. Sometimes someone visited a particular country, they get a device from that country, they bring it in, then they start using it within our environment, and we can't really quite track, or rather, kind of like keep track of what is happening with that particular service or device. So that presents another challenge for us. We are not making much of the technology that we're consuming, and whoever is making the technology imposes some sort of regulations on how the technology can be consumed, also the data that they collect. As much as there is legislation that we're seeing around data protection, I think there's still much more that can be done as far from a regulator's perspective within our South African environment and context.
Certainly, I do agree with you. Maybe we'll continue with this discussion after a short breather, where we'll also open up even the Q&A. I hope listeners, you are also preparing your questions. Please on the chat so that at least we can attend to the questions. We are going to take a quick breather and get into our final session, which is more on the Q&A and also maybe expanding on some of these concepts we've been discussing. Right, welcome back. And if you are joining us, we are actually entering the last section of our segment. I'm joined with three gentlemen, Jasper, Chris, and Eddie, and we are discussing having a conversation around our connected lives, where we are asking the question, what's your aptitude? And most of the discussion points are really just hovering around this whole aspect of, do we really understand our digital footprint? How do we gain visibility? I think we got some insights from what Jasper was saying just in the last segment, to say you could make use of the GDPR-enabled facilities. Even when you go to Google, you are able to check which preferences or which data you are also connected or Google is collecting about you, and you could actually change your preferences. And Eddie was also highlighting some very interesting aspects as well that we also need to look into. And looking at some of those aspects, especially the whole concept, I want to really emphasize what Eddie was talking about in terms of how do you really gain that visibility in terms of your digital footprint as well, and the whole aspect also around the whole cyber hygiene aspect as well. But I think there is a lot of work to be done, like Eddie was also emphasizing. Let's take further this discussion around creating cybersecurity awareness. What are some of the actionable tips? And do you have any questions that you want our panelists to attend to, so that at least we really address them in this last segment where we have our Q&A? Maybe Chris, you would want to extend the discussion further on.
Yeah, we talked about a lot about the privacy, and as I said, there's efforts around the data protection. And I think one of the challenges facing Africa on a whole at the moment is digital transformation is happening, like it or not. But the problem is, without the associated security, it's going to introduce a lot of problems. You know, when we're talking about we have a very secure within Africa records keeping system on paper. But once we start translating that secure record system into the digital world without the necessary security, how do we keep that data safe? How do we keep it's an enabler for corruption, for instance, once those digital records are there, so there needs to be a lot of thought and education and skills development, because frankly the skills aren't here within country, because and I know we're not unique there, and I know there's a skills shortage everywhere. I think South Africa's sharing, and I think probably even in Holland you'd be complaining about the skills gap there. So how do we create those skills? I think that's also, and once we have those skills, obviously then we can roll those skills out, hopefully to help with the awareness campaigns and what we're talking about at the moment.
I want us to visit what Eddie was highlighting, I think from the just previous section on we are importing technology, right? And when it comes to maybe some of the aspects around how do we handle the privacy issues, data collection, whatever the case may be around that whole aspect, we seem to be crippled in that sense. How do we go about it? I think he also indicated the concept of the policymakers having to play a role in that whole domain as well, because I think this is where we also have another big question mark.
Yeah, I think it's the same with any kind of technology, because we import a lot of technology from other countries. That also means that we have a dependency on those countries. So even besides what data they collect, for example, it's just that if this service would be offline, what would happen to your company? Because there are some places where a lot of technology is coming from. So think about the United States, for example, or China for physical technology. We are getting dependent on them, and right now they are developing these services further, while we might say, oh no, that's great, do that. We don't develop our services. So it gets more and more difficult to create those things ourselves if we ever need it. So I think that's really, really difficult. And then on top of that, you still have the privacy issue. So what do they do with the data? What do they do with it now? And what do they do with it if they change their mind about this, for example? Because there might be, for example, good privacy regulations somewhere now, but it doesn't need to be there for the couple 10, 20, 50 years, for example. But I think it's really difficult to say, well, this is the solution, because you can say, well, we're going to develop everything ourselves, but that takes a lot of resources as well. So would you really want to do that? Maybe not. So I think it's really a difficult topic to solve in our discussion, but
certainly. I do agree, so that at least we also don't lose our audience. I think, of course, this also extends even to the apps themselves, because we are more or less in the same dilemma when it comes to the apps, to say we don't know where this is coming from. Let's try to tie back some of the discussion points that might have been raised, because a lot of aspects came out of the discussions we started off with. How can we just tie this back together and say, you know what, let's package it? These are the practical tips I would provide to an end user for creating cybersecurity awareness. We have gotten perspective in terms of the threat landscape, which is really vast and enormous. And if I look at the numbers that were being also highlighted from the beginning, it's also even very scary to just say the least. If I look at some of those figures, a 25%, an 80% increase in card-related fraud, and this is actually even tied to to this whole aspect of saying, like what Jasper was highlighting, to say when you have a password to your Facebook, you wouldn't want to have the same password for your bank account as well. And you are almost like in that zone to say, one area that gets affected may actually have that ripple effect of affecting other areas as well. So how do we tie everything together and say, okay, fine, these are the practical tips we could provide to end users in terms of creating cybersecurity awareness? Let's maybe pause it there, and I'll just give each and every one of you an opportunity to go around it, maybe 2-3 minutes each. Yes.
Shall I start off?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. So already told you about the password manager. I would advise everyone to look into this because this, greatly enhances your security with a very simple thing to do. I would advise everyone to double check identities in WhatsApp, in email. Is somebody who he says he is? Is really the one he says he is? Also, if you get called by a company, you can just mimic, for example, the phone number of the bank. So if you don't trust it, call them back within the number you know that they have. So you can verify these identities. I think you should create a culture where you can talk about these topics within your community, within your company, with your friends and family. So that way everyone knows what they should look out for. And specifically aimed at companies. So that's not specifically personal security, but at companies. What I see a lot is that they build a wall around their company. And on the inside, so the security within the company, they don't spend that much attention on. Because in that case, if somebody gets through the other layer, they can do everything they want when they're inside. And they always get through the other layer because, for example, if you send a phishing mail, there's always someone who will click on it. That just happens. So make sure inside your company, you're also really applying all those measures and not only on the outside. And for everyone specifically, please run updates when available, because that's also a lot of issues.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Of course, some of the things are basic, but when we ignore the basics, we find ourselves exposing ourselves and becoming vulnerable. Chris, Eddie, who is going next?
I'll go next.
All right.
Yeah, look, I concur with most of what Jasper says. On the password side, I think advice changes all the time. I think the modern thinking is the longer the password, the better. So maybe a phrase from a song or something easily remembered that you can put in. It's a lot harder to crack a 14 character code than a complex 6 one. So so definitely the passwords. Watch out for the phishing emails. Just click on the top of the link. You know, when it says it's from someone, click above that and make sure it's from the domain it says. And double check, particularly if it's a financial transaction, double check from the bank. Never, ever reveal your password on the phone or login details. No reputable organization will ever ask you for login details and a password. So if someone from your bank's calling and says we need to reset your password, it's a scam. They will never do that. There's a big problem, legitimate software as well. There's a big problem of pirated software and where this software goes, and there's the viruses embedded in this software that's been downloaded illegally. I mean, we've even seen cases of organizations supplying government contracts with not legitimate software. So make sure you're running up-to-date software. Make sure you're running those patches. Make sure that and this also could become a problem because a lot of our organizations are running obsolete hardware And some of the up-to-date software, it's not always as easy as it sounds to update your softwares, because maybe the new software won't run on the outdated hardware you have, and there's no money for new hardware. So those are some of the other challenges we have. But we have to do the best. Run antivirus software. There's if you can't afford it, there's some good free software out there on your phone, as well as your tablets and your laptops as well. There's anti-phishing, anti-spam software. There's some good open source stuff you can have a look for. I think those are the basics. I mean, from a company level, it's difficult because it depends on the size of your company. If you're a small company, all these things apply. For larger corporations, then as Jasper touched upon, it gets a lot more complex. We do a lot of audits, assessments on organizations, and as Jasper was saying, we send out phishing emails. People are clicking through. They're clicking through. They're giving us passwords. They're giving us login details, from which we can create admin accounts. So we've got your company. So from any company point of view, the awareness is absolutely critical. So the more awareness we can get in the general public, that will come into the workplace as well and make our organizations more secure.
How much awareness can a company run? If I may ask a very naive question, Chris, how much awareness is awareness?
It's about culture. It's about culture. It's about changing the culture of the organization. Because just 6 monthly awareness training doesn't work. You can't. It's about changing the culture within the environment. It's like the mines. I don't know whether anyone's experienced with the mines. They've got this health and safety culture within the mines, which is embedded to everything they do. And I think that with organizations, you could embed that cyber culture within everything you do. If you're going to bring in a new application, a new process, what is the effects? And the other thing within organizations, it's about not just leaving it to the IT guys. So everyone's, for a long time, I thought that IT security is an IT issue. It's not. It's an organizational issue. It's a risk issue. You've got to get the risk guys involved, the audit guys involved, the exec. You've got to have buy-in from the top, particularly at the board level. You've got to understand your risk. What is our risk within the organization? What risk do we face? We ask the basic questions first, and then and don't rush to technology, because we see so much money being spent on technologies. Providers make a lot of promises, but the problem is we don't have the skills to implement that policy. There's no support for this technology, so a lot of money spent on the technology thinking it's going to cure our issues, and it really doesn't. We need to go back to basics, start with good processes, good policies, make sure we enforce those policies.
Indeed, I do concur with you, and we normally say, even also when it comes to cyber hygiene, you wouldn't want to do things that ordinarily you would not do in a physical space online. So the moment you also want to extend that, so there is a lot that could be said around the whole aspect of awareness. I think once every year or annually, it's not enough, or twice, it's not enough when it comes to awareness. Of course, we are talking of October being a Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and this is maybe also the essence we should maybe also promote, to say it's an everyday thing, like everything else you do on a daily basis. Right, Eddie, I'm coming to you.
Right, actually, there has been this theme that's been quite strong in our discussion, which is culture. And for me, I think it's one of those things that we need to immediately do. But I'll break it down into these three aspects, which are the people, the processes, and the technology. And firstly, the technology that we are using, where are you sourcing the technology? And bringing it to the end user. If you walk out and say you're going to buy a phone, where are you buying? Are you buying a device that is legit in itself? Doesn't have anything that's baked into it? So where we buy our gadgets, where we buy our technology, is one of those very, very important things. And secondly, Are we familiar with the technology that we are using other than that which we buy? For example, you walk to an ATM machine. Are you familiar with how an ATM basically is supposed to be like? Does it look rigged? Is there anything that would suggest that someone is tampered with this particular piece of technology? So I would say, firstly, being aware of the technology itself, how it should look like, does it behave the way that it should behave? Does it respond when you give it certain information in the way that it should respond? And you get the kind of feedback, maybe via your one-time pins, via your cell phone, and getting those kind of feedbacks from the technology. I would also look at the second one, which is processes. What is your aptitude, like what you're saying? What's your attitude? What are the processes that you follow? You get into, say, internet cafe. What are the things that you do there? Do you leave your computer with a password that is not locked? Do you lock your devices? Do you share your devices with other colleagues at work? What are the processes that you follow when you're interacting with the technology? And most of the times, I would say we could actually mitigate most of those challenges if we can adhere to the processes that are being given to us within our organizations and even at home. So this is a work device, and you're sharing it with your other family members. Who else has access to that particular device? What company information are they have access to when they are using that particular piece of technology? And lastly, and most importantly, actually, the people. For me, I think the people, they are the first and the last gatekeeper to this. As an individual, are you aware of the technology? What's your awareness level? Are you educating yourself? Are you exposing yourself to information that helps you to build the culture? Because culture, I would say, is progressive, it's sustained, when new information comes, it adds to that culture. So what you might have known last year to work might no longer be working now, because of the way that culture is dynamic. And the same thing with the cybersecurity culture. It's also a very dynamic thing. So you need to constantly expose yourself to information, make sure that you are learning new things. If there is something that you are suspicious about, report it and get information. It could help the next person. It could as well as help you as well. So for me, I would say culture, but basically the people, the processes, and their technology. Yeah.
Indeed. What a way to really just tie everything together in a sense. I'm just giving maybe the last opportunity to our listeners online. If you have any question that you are having as we are about to be wrapping up right now, please, this is your last opportunity to post your question so that at least our panelists can attend to that question. As a way of maybe just giving perspective and maybe opening up discussions even beyond this platform, I'll just ask our panelists to just share whatever initiatives they're having around cybersecurity from maybe their backgrounds, like I was introducing at the very beginning, and some of the initiatives. I also give this background to say, for Chris, we work together as part of the Africa team to the cybersecurity international cybersecurity competition. We call ourselves the Afrique. And Jasper, we met in Greece at the first international cybersecurity competition. And you could also share some also highlights in terms of the work that they are also doing, because through cybersecurity competitions, we are also trying in a way also to create that cybersecurity awareness and also trying to promote the catch them what is their young kind of a mantra in a sense. That's also the platform. So I would just give an opportunity to our panelists to share their various initiatives. I know also Dr. Eddie would also share from an academia perspective, whatever the initiative they're also doing. So maybe in the next few minutes, I'll just give you maybe a minute and a half each to just jump into that. I'll start, Jasper.
Yeah, of course. So in the Netherlands, I organize basically a national program where we challenge young cybersecurity talents to participate, solve technical challenges. We even have a boot camp in the summer where we teach them new skills. We work together with companies for that. And in the end, we select a Dutch national cybersecurity team. And this team that competes in the European challenge against the other countries. And the European region even selects their own team to compete in the international challenges, but that's between continents. So I think that's a really exciting way to promote cybersecurity under young people, and also for them to motivate them to pursue a career in cybersecurity, and give them the means to develop them really quickly, really well, which is a really great cause in my opinion.
Perfect. Chris?
Okay, in addition to the work we do with the Afrique team, we've introduced a program within country, African Cyber Immersion Program, which is aimed at final year students. And to one of the problems we found is the graduates coming from the course didn't have any real world practical experience. They weren't industry ready. So the program is a 6-month program with 2 or 3 sessions a week, with the aim to get the final year students into a position where they can step into a workplace and they'll be work ready. So that's a really exciting initiative. We kicked off our first six guys a few weeks ago. So we're looking forward to expanding that program.
Yes, and Dr. Eddie, I think you'd also give us perspective from University of Fort Hare as well, because they are like our main host for this webinar. Maybe just shed more light in terms of what are some of the initiatives around cybersecurity awareness being done at UFH.
Thank you. So from our side, we have a twofold. So the first side is the research aspect that we're doing. And from the research aspect, we are mainly focusing on digital banking, where we're looking at what are the challenges within that space and exposing our learners to that. We also have community engagement projects where we are engaging with primary school and high school students, bringing to them cybersecurity awareness to also try and work to reduce the effect of cyberbullying within these high school and primary schools. From an internal side, we do have awareness campaigns that are being run in collaboration with the IT department, where time and again we send out information to our students, to our staff members, to alert them on certain incidents that might have happened, or how they can constantly check and improve security when they're using the infrastructure. So basically that's what we're doing, but much of our work as academics is centered around research and bringing our output to the community. So it's a research and a community engagement kind of output that we are mainly focused on from the academic side.
Thank you, Eddie. I would also want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists, Eddie, Chris, and Jasper, for really taking time from your busy schedules to really be with us and share on this important topic on creating cybersecurity awareness. We were really guided by looking at our connected lives. What's your aptitude? That was the question we were trying to answer. Of course, in case we might not have done justice, I hope you're going to get a similar opportunity. But before I close off, I would simply say I want to thank University of Fort Hare and PIKTA Secure Academy. And also, there's a lot of initiative that PIKTA is also doing to create cybersecurity awareness. I would want to shout out to the PIKTA president, Sonwabo Mdaba. Mr. Mdaba and his team are really working tirelessly to make sure that they reach out to the underserved communities. Our listeners online, this has been a great conversation. I hope you picked one or two from this conversation. Till next time, we are logging out. Thank you very much.